Hi there, it's Nadia with Now What. Do you love sports but hate all the drama that goes with it? Well, you're in the right place. Every Wednesday morning we come out with a new interview with a coach or an athlete about how they team build and manage conflict in the sport that they love. Be sure to click the bell, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you.
And on 2nd and 5, Anderson cuts it back. First down and more to the 34-yard line. C.J. Anderson.
Here today with football coach Steve Scarrow. Did I say your name right?
No, that was good. Yeah.
Last week, you may recall on our channel, we interviewed Tony Montgomery, who's a football player, and he spoke about this guy very highly, so I was dying to meet him. Came down to his office in Olympic Village in downtown Vancouver, and here we are. Check it out.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful down here.
So we're going to talk today a little bit about what some of Steve's secrets are to coaching teenage boys and how to get them to manage conflict. The boys all say we just leave it on the field, but I'm sure that there's more to it than that. So here we go.
I've been coaching for, almost 30 years. I started right out of high school. I started coaching with a soccer club that I had played with in Vancouver at Killarney. And out of that, I spent about 15 years coaching Special Olympics soccer. I worked on a program with a friend of mine and went to a couple of Special Olympic provincial games. And then I got into some coaching. I have 3 kids. I got into coaching with a couple of my sons in things like soccer and baseball. And then I found my way into football because my sons joined football. I didn't actually have a football background. I had a rugby background, but I loved football. And so I learned along the way with them. And as we were talking earlier, before we started, I talked about it, that I also had a little foray into girls U12 soccer. And that was a totally different world from teenage boy football. In football, it's a great actually opportunity to try and find places for kids to succeed. It's funny. I think there's a kind of people who haven't been around like actually in the grips of playing football in the actual sport. I think there's that media perception of it's like football guys are these kind of like jocks that everybody knows and they're popular and they're these kind of alpha males and stuff. In general, football is like, I found it was kind of like it's kind of like the island of lost toys. Like they were like a whole range of kids come to play football. Some kids simply come just because they're big. They're big and it was an opportunity for them to be in it because people say, well, you should go and play football because you're big. And then there's some kids who just love the sport but they're really small and trying to find places that they're going to succeed is at first a challenge, but there's opportunity all through it. And I found that so many times where everybody kind of starts thinking they want to be the quarterback or the running back, but once they've had success as an offensive lineman or as a cornerback or a safety, they take kind of pride in that. So much of it's about self-confidence. It's amazing how much of it's about self-confidence.
So it sounds like there's different types of kids all coming together to be on the same team from what you're describing.
Yes.
And the thing, one of the things that they have in common is that they've been identified as being big and physically probably appropriate for football. What I'm wondering is how, if there's such different kind of personality types, how do you bring those different personalities together to be able to work collaboratively and work as a team?
That on every single play, everybody has a job. And we really, really tried to reinforce that in our coaching in that we would make a point of saying to a receiver who was on the opposite side of the field, we could be throwing the ball to one side of the field and there's a receiver on the opposite side of the field that the ball comes nowhere near. But if he doesn't run his route, if he doesn't, let's say, run an out and go towards the sidelines, he has to take that player with him and potentially take the safety over, has to cover him, which puts that guy on the other side that we're throwing the ball to open. If the guys that are blocking aren't blocking and doing their job, the quarterback can't throw that ball to him. If that running back hasn't run the last 2 plays up the middle and they have to look for the run, it doesn't give our quarterback the time to throw the ball. So every play, even though we only see the guy who catches the ball or the guy who runs with the ball or throws the ball as being the key points to it, everyone is doing something and you need to recognize that. I remember there was one time a really shy player and a great athlete who he ran back a punt for a touchdown, running in and out of 6 or 7 other players on the team. But the last play that actually opened him up to run for the touchdown was a block from this very shy player who gave one block to open up the sidelines for him to run down and score. I immediately went to him and said, that doesn't happen without you. And that's that kind of self-confidence that comes in them, and then ideally a recognition from that player who scored the touchdown. As we grew a culture of that, of guys recognizing other guys doing work that gave them opportunity. I was always so proud of the boys when you would see them recognize that you congratulate them on a touchdown, and they would then say, well, we wouldn't even have the ball if he didn't make the interception for us, or I don't even get open without that block there, or he made, you know what, I made a bad throw and he made a great catch. It's great. It's awesome. It's awesome to see, and it's awesome to see when you grow up, when you see kids all the way from like 11 until 17, and they kind of grow up and see their maturity level and respect level for each other. It's awesome. It's really cool.
Steve, can you share any specific strategies that you use to grow that culture?
Football's filled with big personalities, and filled with big personalities, and people kind of play the part of football coaches a lot of the time with a lot of yelling and a lot of kind of intensity. And I think myself and some of our players, we patterned some behaviors off of past coaches that we had seen that we didn't really want to be part of that culture, because we felt that our own program was maybe losing a little bit of respect and recognition, because we were full of so much bluster and so much kind of yelling and fighting potentially with referees and other coaches, and I just said I didn't want to be part of that, and I explained to the guys why it was important to me. That I was like, I don't want to appear like the fool, and I don't want you guys to appear like fools. I don't want us to walk on a field where everyone's like, oh, here come those guys again, and I think that benefited us. We definitely had lots of confidence. We had on the field fights, and we had parents running onto the field, and that was the one reminder. And there's yelling from me too, which is everyone get back and stand behind me, which is a weird thing when it becomes, as you see my size, that everyone is towering over top of me.
I'm just gonna interject here, Steve. How tall are you?
I'm like about 5'6". And so yes, everybody, and by the end of it, everyone was bigger than me. So yeah, but you can hear a little bit of, I have a very big voice. So there was a lot of stand behind me, and then gathering everybody together and saying, remember, we're not those guys. Let's not be those guys anymore, you guys. Let's not be those guys. It's very easy to get wrapped up in it. I had my fair share of yapping at referees, or yapping at another coach, or yapping at a parent, because you're heightened. You're at this high level, and I would say recognition for people who maybe come from outside of football is it's a hard sport, because there's a decision made on every single play. It doesn't have the free form that hockey or basketball or soccer have. A decision has to be made on every single play, and in general, that coach makes that decision. So to stay at that kind of level of heightened, this is important, and we have to achieve something on this play right now. And the quarterback's coming to you asking you for what that play is. You're up at this heightened level, and then a distraction comes from an angry parent yelling something from a sidelines, sometimes one of your own parents or a parent from another team. It's easy to immediately snap your head towards that and become engaged in that. And that's where I had my own son twice. One of my sons has come to me and been like, you got to get your head back in the game. You don't need to be going and looking for a commissioner because you're mad about a play or you're mad about a parent. We only have a certain amount of time in the game. You need to find your own focus on this, which is great. And it's cool when they get older and they teach you those lessons. He
probably learned that from you, which is kind of neat.
Maybe,
and
hopefully.
Then he's giving you your own advice right back.
Yes,
right?
I think that definitely, I definitely got that delivered back to me on times where I got delivered back the exact same thing that I was, yelling at them on occasion.
So talking about parents, I'm just wondering, do you have any, thinking as a parent, it must be hard to see your kid out there kind of getting beat up or having calls made, as you're saying, so frequently that you may think are unfair sometimes, and just the frequency of that. Do you have any sort of advice for other coaches about how to manage parents that are kind of difficult? Or is that a whole other topic, Steve?
Well, that's you know what, I don't know if I have good advice for it. I felt I was always lucky to have a lot of parents who who basically, they just wanted the kids to be treated fairly, and they wanted to see the kids win. But I didn't feel like the stakes were as high for me. Honestly, in comparison to, I think, a lot of rep programs that I see in hockey and soccer, I felt like a lot of the kids were there because they loved football, and their parents were supporting them because they loved football, and there wasn't as large an agenda that sometimes I think you find a little bit in hockey and soccer, because the pathway is a lot grayer and vaguer in football than it is, and they're not seeing as many kids proceed and being like, this is what I want my kids. So I didn't feel like I had that conflict with my parents. I'd usually send out an email in the very beginning and actually just say to them, here are our goals, and this is kind of what I believe in. And if I had a player who, I did have like direct conversations on occasion with parents where we were going into a playoff game or a championship game, and I would say to a parent, he's played this position, we've rotated him into this position. In this game, we're trying to win. The goal is maybe also when you have like 2-year programs where the second-year guys, this is like they put a lot of time into their goal is to win. We're maybe not going to play him in this position. We're still going to play him, but we're going to maybe move him. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're honest and direct, some parents still feel like it's not fair or is fair, but at least you're being honest and saying it up front. I'm a big believer, because I wasn't a great athlete myself, so I'm a big believer in that everybody really you can find time for everybody to play. Yeah. Like you really can. I don't buy that you can't find time. And if you set up maybe when we get to maybe down to like semifinals or finals, maybe, but even at that, really, if you get the right mix of kids, and also if everybody's been learning and playing all along, everybody contributes.
Who's motivated you on this coaching journey? Who's been your inspiration?
I definitely say one of the people would be my dad. He coached my soccer with me from the age of 10 till 17, and definitely I patterned my football coaching after the way he coached soccer, because he'd never played soccer before. And so he would actually go to my soccer camps and bring like a notebook and copy drills, and he would watch the old NASL Whitecaps and try to learn from that and learn from other teams. And so I learned from that you could learn from the game and from other coaches and other teams. I was also really, really lucky to also have a lot of great coaches through high school, and old school kind of like 1980 style coaches who were hard, but also like super fair and actually really cared about you, and again could find opportunity for you and kind of create. We talked about that, creating that self-confidence.
So any last thoughts before we wrap up? Any sort of tips that you'd like to share about your coaching experiences? You sort of have a bunch of coaches listening in today and a bunch of athletes as well.
Yeah, I think one it's a lot of it's about communication and kind of and listening to the players. I think sometimes coaches can get really wrapped up in how this reflects on them, and start kind of counting those wins and losses directly as their own wins and losses. And I even found that in some ways myself. I found it like a stressful thing where I was concerned about losing, where I felt I had teams that were good, that they should be winning, and so I started making it about me, and it's not. It's a collective journey, and you get so much out of it. Like just with the boys and being with them all the way from kind of 11 till 17, they grow up with you, and it's incredibly sweet to see. We have all these experiences of these like 17 and 18-year-old boys that tell each other that they love each other, and we all like so often like say when they play, like we'll say, okay, bye, I love you, it's very sweet that they can be horrible to each other at times, but it's always very brotherly, and there's definitely a great deal of caring because we've all worked kind of this journey together. And so I mean, I may not coach this year. This might have been the end of me coaching, and I'll miss it a great deal because it was really lovely. We played kind of maybe what was our last games as a group up in Kelowna this summer, and we lost in a quarterfinal, and the guys were a little bit emotional. I was quite emotional about it too. And we just, I said, but you know what? I said, I already won. Like, this was all so fun and like so great. And I never even knew I would coach football. I love football. Getting to be part of it all and kind of learning along the way, and then seeing how good the guys all became. A number of the guys have gone on. One of our players has gone on. He's playing at SFU, and a number of our players have gone on to be conference high school all-stars, and even the guys who aren't playing anymore. I watch them kind of grow so much, and they're good people. So it's exciting to be part of that.
And that's what it all comes down to.
I think so.
People,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Really, like in the end, and I told them that too. I said after we lost this game, I said, guys, you know what? No one ever looks at a resume when you're 4 years old and says, hey, I saw you lost the 2017 flag football championship. Nobody ever says that, but you will remember all of these times, and you're going to remember a lot of these. I remember games I played when I was 12 years old, and you remember some of these games that we lost even, and how emotional they were. Some of these games that we won and stuff. That's like the important stuff. Like, that's fun. So.
What an absolute pleasure that was meeting Coach Steve. To hear directly about the impact that he's had on his athletes, make sure that you check out the interview that we did last week with Tony right here on this YouTube channel. There's a link to our website, which also has some great tips and ideas about conflict management and team building on our blog, so be sure to check it out. It's in our show notes. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'd love to hear what you have to say. We'd love to hear any ideas that you have for interviews, so please comment below.